Hey everybody, Chris the old ass retro gamer here, back again with another episode of Top 3 Tuesday. Today's topic are my top 3 video game scores, or soundtracks, depends on who you talk to. Terminology could be different, maybe. I'm a huge fan of classical music, and film and video game scores often remind me of classical music. I mean, let's face it, they are created the exact same way that like Mozart and Beethoven and Chopin created their stuff back in the day, so, comparable, kind of? Probably not. So what are my top 3 video game scores? Well, an obvious choice would have been ActRaiser by Yuzo Koshiro. It is my favorite game of all time, and it is my favorite video game score of all time. But I talk about that game way too much on the channel, so I wanted to skip over that to talk about other ones that I find phenomenal. And let's start with number 3, and that would be Silver Surfer for the NES by Tim and Jeff Follin. Say what you will about the video game, it is a super hard shmup. I still have a soft spot for it because it was one of those games I played all the time when I was a kid. Tim and Jeff pushed the limits of what the NES could do sound-wise and came up with a score that is very rock and electronic inspired, and it just gets you amped up for the game. I think one of the reasons why I played the game as much as I did, regardless of how hard it was because I just loved listening to the music. Still, to this day, I have a couple of tracks on my iPod that I listen to in my car all the time while I'm driving to and from work. And I think it still holds up to this day. Yeah, I mean, it does sound bit-toony, but, I mean, come on, it was from an NES game, so what do you expect? But it is really catchy, it is very energetic, and I love it. Here's a little sample. My second choice would be Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, that was available for both the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. I owned the Xbox 360 version. It was composed by Lorne Balfe, who was a protege of Hans Zimmer, who also composed all of the main themes for the game, which is kind of amazing knowing that Hans Zimmer, who is a composer for film, did movies like Inception and Man of Steel and the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. And going all the way back to like the 80s, he did Rain Man and Driving Miss Daisy. And one of my favorite cheesy scores, Drop Zone. Zimmer and Balfe came up with this score that is extremely cinematic. I mean, it feels like you're in this massive epic action movie. And that's one of the reasons why I also find Modern Warfare 2 my favorite game in the Call of Duty series, because it just feels so grand and epic and makes you feel like you are in an interactive film. There's this track called Whiskey Hotel and Green Flares that I think is one of the greatest pieces of music ever composed for a video game. I mean, it would be awesome in a movie alone, but I mean, the fact that it was for a video game, it's an amazing score. Track down a copy if you can. It is absolute oral bliss. Listen to this radness. And my number 1 pick, that is not ActRaiser, is Super Turrican for the Super Nintendo, composed by Chris Hulsbeck, who has actually composed the music for every single game in the Turrican series, which is amazing. It started off as like a Commodore 64 game, and it was still going strong in the 16-bit era. And while he does tend to reuse the same themes and pieces of music for all these different games in the series, like you will find music from Super Turrican in Mega Turrican for the Genesis, I think the Super Nintendo version is where it's at. To me, it sounds the best coming out of that SNES sound chip. I don't know why, it just does. Maybe it's because it's the first version of the game I ever played. nostalgia could have a factor in it. I don't know. All I know is it sounds amazing. It honestly sounds like CD quality music and not like MIDI shit. The game is like a side-scrolling action game like Contra, and the music is sprawling and epic. It makes you feel like you're in this intergalactic war. I mean, it is amazing. It gets you going, man. Back in the day, I had all my video game consoles hooked up through a stereo system that I had. And I used to record the music from the games, especially if there was a sound test on audio cassettes, and just listen to it in my car and whatnot, on the bus when I was in school, all that kind of stuff. And you know what? I have MP3s of the entire soundtrack, and I listen to it in my car all the time. It really gets my motor running, and it's one of the reasons why I like the game as much as I do. The game is amazing, even without the music, but with it is just absolute perfection. Take a listen to some of this. So those are my top 3 video game scores, not counting ActRaiser because that would be at number 1 all the time. I don't want to keep repeating myself. What are your top 3 video game scores? I really want to know, so please make a video response and leave the link to it in the comments below because I would love to hear what you have to say, what your thoughts and opinions are on the subject. Film and video game music is a really big part of my life. It's something I really like talking about, so I would love to get conversations going on this subject. Let's see some video responses. Let's see some comments below. Let's get to chit-chatting about it. So until next time and the next Top 3 Tuesday video, I am Chris, the old-ass retro gamer, signing off.